Hey team, I'm working from home today. Sunlight has reappeared at all hours of the morning and evening. Like, I took the dog for a walk at like 5:30 p.m. yesterday, and the sun was still shining. Like, Britain has awakened. Anyway, like I said, I'm getting ready to work from home today, so I thought I would try to be a fake makeup blogger for a bit and combine my Rawvlog with a get ready with me, because that's what we do here, right? We play around with format. I saw this comment, this thread post a few days ago, and I have not been able to get it out of my mind. And I really need to put my feelings about it somewhere. So, like I said, we're getting ready for the day. We're putting on our face. We're putting on our mask to the world. So I want to talk about this feeling I have of moral grief. And I have no idea how deep this is going to get or where this is going to go. Then this is a complete raw vlog. I haven't scripted this. I just have feelings that I need to get out. Again, this post just hit me between the ribs when I saw it, because in almost every aspect of my life, I feel a certain sense of betrayal is too strong a word, but I feel an acute sense of disappointment for a lot of the figures in my life who birthed me, raised me, influenced me in key ways into feeling and believing the way that I do. And it would be one thing if this was just a process of me going, hey, I disagree with this thing, or this perspective, or, I came to think differently over time. That's not what I feel. I feel, in so many ways, an acute sense that a lot of people in my life and in my community used to believe differently, or at least presented themselves to me as though they did. I have felt, and I know there's, again, as always, so much more eloquent things to say from much smarter and better people than me, but I do feel as though I have witnessed and experienced messaging shifts over my lifetime that have gotten us into, the techno-libertarian hellscape that we're all facing at the moment. But I really struggle to reconcile so many of the lessons and teachers and mentors of my youth and my formative years ending up where they are ending up. And let me tell you why. So, I have no idea if this is going to backfire on me. Like, the possibilities of it doing so are quite high, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my parents. I'm going to try and keep it somewhat vague, because I'm not actually here to roast anybody in any way, and I'm not trying to change their minds. I joke a lot that, having left Mormonism, which is a highly, highly missionary-focused faith, I'm not in the business of proselytizing anymore. I'm not looking to, oh my goodness, this chair is doing weird things. I'm not looking to proselytize anymore. I'm not looking for converts. because I'm increasingly convinced that, people are not open to being converted. And most of the hashtag debate me bro bullshit we see online is just that. It's performative bullshit that's more interested in sparking fights than in genuine conversations. Put a pin in that. We'll see if I get back to it. But I'm going to talk about some of my family relationships in a way that's kind of new and vulnerable for me and could backfire spectacularly in my personal life. Let's see what happens. So, one of my parents has always had a libertarian streak to them, quite literally, and in a self-aware sort of way, and in a principled way in some respects. This parent has always purported to believe in smaller government. They do not believe in the apparatuses of a large state, they say. And they have always voted accordingly. They are a registered member of the Libertarian Party. They participate in their state's Libertarian Party. In many ways, they walk the walk. And in many ways, they don't. This parent also draws a military pension. This parent also benefits from military health care at time of recording, because, the Doge and Cell boys are doing whatever it is they're doing with the mechanics of government. So my parent might get exactly what they say that they want, and I just don't think that they'll actually be very happy about it if they do. This parent also draws another pension from their local government job that they had for many years. So this parent's higher education was also funded because they went into military service. This small state person, this person who hates the apparatuses of the state, has benefited from it my entire life and has built their career around this my entire life, and will hopefully benefit for it for the rest of their life. I'm someone who believes that if you do military service, the government absolutely owes you the debt and obligation of care. And I have in a way that many of my fellow lefties may find surprising, I am hugely, hugely supportive of the aspects of the military that particularly support its social infrastructure. I went to military high schools. I benefited from the DoD's investment in the military family community, because they understood that part of a strong military is the social infrastructure that supported those behaviors. Don't get me started on contractors, though. That's a very different conversation, isn't it? But as for the people who, don uniform and give years, if not their entire careers, to our military efforts and the infrastructure that supports it, those people deserve our care. So again, that turned into a bit of an unexpected rant. So my parent, who doesn't believe in the big state, if you will, again, will draw 2 state pensions, has benefited from healthcare and coverage for my entire life, and will benefit hopefully till the end of their lives, has taken advantage of the education opportunities that are made available to service members and their families. In every single way, benefits from the very infrastructures of state that they purport to hate. It's very Ron Swanson, which is perhaps hilarious in isolation, but deeply depressing to me the more that I look at this. And the longer that this has been stewing in my brain, the more I am baffled at their ability to hold these 2 counteractive positions in their head at the same time. The libertarian to alt-right pipeline is a well-established thing. And again, you can find excellent, thoughtful, academically vigorous writing on this. But I've kind of made it a personal bit of study over the last few years to really understand the streak of kind of libertarianism, anti-government thought that has always been part of the American psyche and is, can have its good points or its useful aspects. How it's taken over so many people's brains, frankly, including my parent. Because I don't understand the ability to hold so many logically conflicting viewpoints in heads as I am seeing of late. I would say that this parent has been radicalized in many ways. Again, my whole life, they were probably small c conservative, leaned conservative, but very much did not buy into, neocon, big state kind of aspects. This was my parent, I think, genuinely believed in many aspects of the Tea Party movement when it started. And those people are awfully fucking quiet right now. The Tea Party to QAnon pipeline is incredibly real and absolutely insane to me in so many ways. But again, in the Venn diagram that I talk about, I understand how you start in one place and end up in the other. My parent, as far as I'm aware, is not in the QAnon pipeline, thank God. But they are deeply, deeply libertarian forum-pilled, such that at one point I had to tell them, stop forwarding me your newsletters, stop randomly sharing some of these things with me because I'm not the audience for it. And, if you keep doing it, I feel the urge to respond and I don't want to fight with you. That's just not a productive use of my time and I don't want to damage our relationship unnecessarily. And to their credit, they listened and did as I asked. But the radicalization has not stopped. And in recent years, this parent has gotten more and more into overtly right-wing media because, again, there's enough of the Venn diagram overlap for the philosophies that they purport to hold and these other media and political ecosystems and spaces. And of course, once you get into that Venn diagram, once you get into that environment, you start being influenced by the other things around it. So this libertarian, I don't care what anyone says or does with their own life, just stay out of mine, got on the anti-trans hype a couple of years ago in a way that was so emotionally disappointing to me, and also baffling to me for someone who, for the majority of my life, was so loud about not caring about what other people did with their bodies or their beliefs. Suddenly they cared very deeply about some things that they had been radicalized into caring about where they never even had an opinion before. And I found this hugely upsetting and damaging. But to pivot, this parent also is a deeply religious person and is very invested in, their church community. And for my whole life, at least when I was young, very devoutly and I believe authentically, gave me certain religious messages and purported to follow them, in a way that I have personally watched them shift away from as their political and philosophical projects have become more central to their core identity, which is wild to me. Because again, I don't think this is happening in isolation. There's a lot of religious communities in the US that have become more overtly political projects than they have ever been religious ones. And Mormonism is absolutely on that list. There's also variations within Mormonism that, tangent of a tangent, are really, really interesting because there's a lot of folklore in Mormonism that is anti-government. You have to remember that Mormonism was a fringe religion that literally fled the confines of the United States due to legitimate persecution, but then set up an effective theocracy to impose its own religious order and will, and then had to wrestle with itself about whether or not it wanted to become a state, first a territory and then a state again of America, after having literally fled from it in the first place. So this anti-government strain has always existed within Mormonism and has been a tension, which is hilarious. The fact that, we have this white bread mid-century nuclear family identity that the Mormon community has largely solidified into, the leave it to Beaver kind of view, and, the fact that the FBI and the CIA recruit so heavily from the Mormon community is wild when you remember that we started as a anti-government sex cult on the prairie. History's funny, ain't it? And there are libertarian or even Mormon nationalist groups and projects. So again, this strain has always existed and the tension has always been there. But to watch my parent go from a fairly normal, mid-century modern, active duty military, small c conservative, to a loud, but in my opinion, inauthentic libertarian who listens to media almost exclusively from the Daily Wire, is something that I have struggled to make sense of. Because in so many ways, everything about that sentence that I just said does not align with the theology that they raised me with, or with the morals and the values that they purported to me their whole life. Another parent is highly educated, multiple degrees, authentically academic and rigorous, and interested in academic rigor, and has been for my whole life. And yet, I have watched them become radicalized, frankly, as far as I can tell, by Facebook. And I say that glibly, but I mean that by this constant stream of consuming content that Facebook designed itself to prioritize, I have watched them become influenced by anti-science narratives. I have watched them, in my opinion, adopt quack medicine practices, and have go from a small D Democrat or small L liberal person in so many ways. Again, this is my memory of my childhood, and the conversations that I had, and how I perceived and absorbed the lessons and perspectives that they shared with me, to a hardcore Trumpist, it seems. And like, how? Like, genuinely, how? I have such a hard time squaring the narratives that I hear them spout to me with the person who raised me. And I have a hard time being so aware of the fact that I live in a completely different reality from this person. This person, after Israel invaded Gaza in response to the Hamas-led terror attack of a couple of years ago, called me up to say, "Oh my goodness, are you safe in London? I've seen that there's riots and there's protests." And yes, there was a protest march that took place in Whitehall. There are protests almost every day in Whitehall. They are very well organized, meticulously contained, and frankly not at all disruptive. So I'm not sure how useful they are as protests. I myself have attended more than one of them in past years for causes that relate to me. But this person seemed to have seen something on Facebook telling them that there was rioting and looting in the streets of London, which there just wasn't. And I remember going, what are you talking about? And they said, well, I've just seen that there's like these dangerous protests in London. I'm like, there might have been a pro-Palestinian march. In fact, I'm pretty sure that there have been multiple, but what are you talking about? There are no riots. Nothing has broken free. What are you talking about? And this person got kind of quiet and just said, well, I just saw it on the news. I'm like, what news are you watching? And, I gently had to say, for what it's worth, maybe vary up your media consumption. And I've watched this parent become more religiously extreme in their beliefs and observations, and more, sounds dreadful, but kind of self-righteous in their pronouncements about things. And I struggle, because my memory of growing up is that I grew up in a family that lived and worked internationally. We were a military family, but some of those appointments were not just strictly military, but, associated with NATO and other things. So we grew up moving every couple of years, and we saw the world. And my parents were both really good at making sure that we, the kids, saw the world and took advantage of the benefits of this lifestyle. My memory of my parents is that they were surprisingly pluralistic in many ways compared to many other, frankly, Mormon parents that I came to know. That they were really good at differentiating their beliefs and worldview from other people's, and were good at engendering respect and curiosity. They attended Seder meals with Jewish people. They took me to midnight Christmas Mass, in Catholic countries. We didn't go to Disneyland as a family. We went, we hiked Hadrian's Wall, and my academic parent was pointing out the cool things to know historically about this thing that we did. I've got some issues about the way that I was raised and that I grew up, and that I have alluded to in the past. But I grew up in many ways being taught to be extremely open-minded, to be generously minded towards other groups and communities, to internalize my religious worldviews and values because I didn't depend on them being dominant or even prominent, to be sincerely felt and observed. And I grew up with, in my opinion, a healthy sense of patriotism. I am really, really critical of performative patriotism, which American culture is extremely prone to and is very lucrative for a lot of people. I dislike performative patriotism intensely. But for all that I'm very critical of my government, I do consider myself a patriotic person. You can love something and criticize it at the same time. You can see the value in something and also hold it accountable. These two things are not mutually exclusive, and indeed, I think, are evidence of healthy patriotism. If you love your form of government, if you admire and respect and value it, you hold it to certain standards. And in so many ways, the breaking of my religious faith came down to the conflicts that I saw between what I believed and what I felt I had been taught and nurtured into, and differences that I saw from people in power. Politically, I have a really hard time squaring the people who raised and produced me and all of my weird leftist glory with the people who I now know. And even my husband, who I've been married to for 15 years and who I've been partnered with for the better part of 17, he himself has witnessed a shift in my parents' politics and their priorities and the things that they care about in ways that he can comment on probably more authentically than I can, because he's quite literally at more of a distance. He's watched them change. I have such a hard time squaring the people that I know with the people who I remember. And I feel such, yes, anger, but mostly confusion and pain and bafflement to experience the disconnect that I do between what they told me and taught me growing up and what they say and do now. And I feel the same about whole political movements right now. Two things can be true at once. The end result of certain kinds of unfettered capitalism was always going to be oligarchy. And there are the academic and the practical critiques and responses to combating that trend. But isn't it wild to watch so many people who for your whole life were, democracy is the way, and America is, a noble experiment, and blah, 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 given to techno-libertarianism stroke fascism so quickly? Isn't it disappointing to see people who spend their whole life saying, other people's business is other people's business, and my obligation is to be a good member of the community and good citizen and, live according to my values, go to being anti-everything, LGBT, feminist, trans, POC, DEI writ large? Isn't it fascinating to watch that happen so quickly? One of my parents quite literally had their career based and their education based in environmental law. And last I had a decent conversation with them on the topic, is now kind of become a climate change denier. I don't know how to square this shift, and I don't know what to do about it. And I struggle every day trying to navigate relationships with people who have, from my perspective, a flawed one, definitely, have changed so much in the course of my lifetime. I really, really struggle to reconcile the parents of my memory with the parents I have now. I broke up with Mormonism a long time ago, but I deeply, deeply care about the health and well-being of the community and the people in it. And I still refer to myself as Mormon because that's how I was raised. Sorry. I don't believe, but that's still my people. That's still my language, and that's still my in-group in a lot of ways. And I struggle to compare, or I struggle to see the wider trends of that community and square it with the beliefs and teachings of my youth, which again is more nuanced and problematic because the church has always taught weird and wacky things. But like so many other things, they too have taken this hard right for a variety of reasons, trying to align themselves politically with, the powerful evangelical movement, trying to prove themselves to be real Americans in a way that was only really good for the 1950s, and somehow they got stuck there. weighing into political debates and challenges where they didn't and don't have a very good or robust theology, or indeed one that could lend itself to all kinds of interpretations. My hot take is that Mormonism could be one of the most trans-inclusive offshoots of American Christianity possible because of its nuanced take on sex and gender and the nature of it. But they didn't. They couldn't. They didn't even open themselves to the possibility. There was no philosophical debate. Trans people were icky and weird, and therefore they're anti-trans. And now, therefore, the state of Utah is doing some wild and wacky shit. And another parent figure in my life has also gotten on the anti-trans bullshit in a way that is really disappointing to me and is also deeply at odds with the generosity of spirit and the kindness and also the kind of live and let live attitude that they spouted off to me my whole life about. I struggle because where I am now, I think I'm not shocked that libertarianism has shifted into techno-feudalism. I think I understand the trajectory of how we got here. It makes perfect sense to me. And I think that was probably always going to be the end result, which is why I'm so critical of libertarianism and or specifically the American version of it, as I am, because this is the end result and was always going to be the end result. But I am still so wildly disappointed in the people of my life, in the people of my life who have traversed this path. And I don't know why. Because if this was the end result, this is a logical result, it shouldn't be surprising to me that this is where they've ended up, but I'm deeply, deeply disappointed. I'm so deeply disappointed in watching parents and parental figures become more close-minded, less generous, and frankly, I'm going to be blunt, less kind to outgroup people over the course of my lifetime. I am disappointed in watching people who are so loud about their politics and their philosophies in a way that very much influenced me to be the same, end up in positions that are so counterintuitive to the movements that they espoused and dedicated time and resource and energy to 25 years ago. It's probably because they're the people who are closest to me that I feel the way that I do. I can look at the small c conservative shift into the MAGA movement with a degree of distaste and probably contempt, if I'm being honest with myself, which is part of the problem. But I can watch that shift happen at a distance and be like, I am so angry that you fell for this and that you shifted in this way. That you have revealed so many of your principles and your talking points to have been fluff and PR. I'm not surprised, but I'm angry. But when it comes to the people in my life, I'm not angry. I'm just so fucking sad. I'm so sad to see so many people whom I love not stick to the morals, the values, and the theology that they spend a lot of time trying to indoctrinate me into. Didn't work. Sorry. But it also didn't work for them either. And while I've absolutely, everyone's opinions and philosophies shift somewhat over time. That's normal. I'm not criticizing that. Mine have. I've gotten more leftist as I've gotten older, hilariously, but I've always been what I am. But I have noticed a real difference in people who've become more intense versions of something that they already were. And that's not the same thing as claiming that's what's happening when what you've actually done is flipped on so many of the values and priorities and principles that you once claimed. Living here in Europe as I do, I'm watching in real time the brand of America be broken and tarnished in new ways. In ways that might actually end up being good for the continent, being good for the European Union. It might actually draw some lines in the sand where people will stop relying on America, the brand, to be a character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to literally be Captain America. You know, we've had this narrative of America as the good guys for the better part of a century now. And we're having this real mask off moment, aren't we? I mean, corruption has always been a thing in politics. It's inherent to the nature. Oligarchy has always been present in America. But there is something really mask off about the moment we're living in, where people are just revealing the worst versions of those things to be the case and to be empowered. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. And maybe that's what I'm struggling with. Maybe what I'm struggling with is more of a sense that whether or not they realized it, a lot of the people in my life who raised me, shaped me, molded me, maybe they didn't mean it either. And I don't know which is worse. To see a mask off happen, or to watch what I believe to be genuinely held principles shift in real time. I don't know which is more devastating. But what I feel in so many of these relationships, and these are the relationships that I'm focusing on, but they are by no means the only ones where I watched this happen, or just the ones that I'm choosing to highlight. I don't know which is more upsetting to me. Ideologies and endpoints being revealed to be what they actually are, or feeling like that a lot of people who I, for the majority of my life, considered to be authentic and principled in their beliefs are so willing and easily flipped on them. I don't have an answer. I don't even feel like I have a problem statement here. But this post hit me hard because it encapsulated a feeling of grief that I have been contending with for almost my whole adult life, but which is only getting more and more pronounced and acute with every political cycle and with every twist of the screw. I don't like feeling this way about the people in my life. But I do. And I don't know what to do with that sense of grief. I don't know where to put it. I don't know how to turn it into something useful. I don't know how to convert it into any kind of practical fuel because, like I said, I'm not in the business of proselytizing anymore. I have no hope of changing these people's minds. I've tried and I've failed, and I'm not trying anymore. But it's still so, so sad to feel, again, betrayed is not the right word, but to feel morally let down. No one really talks about how to turn the grief of disappointment into something more productive. Oh, golly, I think that's probably a real sense of the political rage and angst that we're dealing with. We have generations of people who've been disappointed that the narratives that they've been told are turning out to have been at best wrong and in worst case lies. I'm not surprised that disappointment is manifesting in rage. It should. I'm certainly angry. But all of that rage is not fixing anything. It's just making people worse versions of themselves and exacerbating the very problems that caused it in the first place. I don't know what to do about that. If you've solved this massive existential problem, please let me know. I'm genuinely looking for solutions. But also let me know if this sense of grief that I'm describing at all resonates, and if I've even managed to articulate it. Because this grief and disappointment might be the defining emotion of this weird millennial generation. Just my whole adult life, the promises have been breaking. The promises of education resulting in better quality of living. The promises of working hard and being rewarded. The promises of making good life choices around lifestyle and, personal responsibility towards personal and public health. The promises of, of capitalism, such as they are. The promises of democracy, like every single aspect of the social contract seems to be breaking and breaking and breaking. And it is really weird to be the generation that I genuinely believe is experiencing the brunt of this, because what are we supposed to do with it? And if the solution is turn towards fascism, no fucking thank you. But how disappointing is it to see so many people in our lives just make that call? Especially when they were raised by the quote unquote greatest generation. It's baffling. It's baffling. I understand the emotional arc of how we get here, but I don't understand the logic of it. And frankly, I just expected better from so many people in my life. And I'm constantly devastated and disappointed to feel let down by that. Let's talk again soon.